and he's been just a cheerleader telling them to just stand firm, do what's right. Well, what he's doing is solidifying this division. He's solidifying the division between groups. And everybody's being split up into these groups, and these groups are becoming more well-defined all of the time. And the more we split, the more defined and solidified that these groups become, the wider the division, the more they're getting exactly what they want. These huge, solid divisions. That's what's going to bring the change that they want. There's a lot of people that believe that we should stay with what the Founding Fathers started. And they give the argument that this is what has worked for all of these years. For 200 plus years, this has been a system that has worked very well. The other side is saying, well, the world is changing. We need for these documents, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all of these things to be living, breathing documents that change with the times. Excuse me. Oh, man, this cold, I'm telling you, is kicking me here sometimes. Well, here's the deal. You know, during those 200-plus years that the system has been in place, that it has worked, we have also gone through changes. But we went through those changes and was able to move through those changes without changing our founding documents. Now, all of a sudden, they say that we can't go through changes without changing our founding documents. Well, this is important because of this. Look, when it comes to changes in the world, we have to ask ourselves, are these changes that are good? Are they bad? Are we using enough critical thought to see the consequences of what we're doing? That's really what the question is. Do we see the consequences or even the unintended consequences of what we're doing? Now, we have a lot of different groups here that all have different agendas. Let's be frank about this, folks. Not everyone is going to get their way. In fact, I would say, no matter what group that you put yourself in, whether you're homosexual, straight, conservative, liberal, libertarian, Christian, Mormon, Catholic, Islamic, Buddhist, Hindu, you know, you're not all going to get your way. In fact, you know what? I'll bet none of you are going to get your way. I'm thinking that all of this is going to be set aside for a new agenda, for a new world order. This is a world order that's going to be different from what everybody else wants. Not just you progressives, not just you conservatives or religious or the gay rights movement or the civil rights movement or any of these other movements. You think you're going to get your way, that it's going to go your way, that you're going to keep fighting. Well, none of you are getting your way. This is going to be something new and different. Now, it's like I've said in past programs. Each one of these world leaders who have tried to bring about change during the last 100 years have all had a little bit of a different idea. And I've said this before. If you've heard this before, then stick with me here, because I've got a lot of people who haven't heard this before, and this is important. Hitler had his own idea of the way he thought the world should be, and he incorporated some aspects of what past leaders have done along with his own ideas. Well, Marx and Stalin, Lenin, all did the same thing. They had their own idea, even though they incorporated some ideas from some other leaders who have tried similar things. Well, currently, they're doing the same thing. Whether it's Obama, the powers that are controlling Obama, or the UN, some of you say it's a shadow government, whatever it is, whether that's true or not, whatever it is, this new power that's coming about has a different agenda. It has an agenda that's a one world government agenda. And they're going to achieve this agenda through currency and through politics, through division. They're creating massive worldwide chaos. This worldwide chaos. Why do you think we're at perpetual war? Why does this president, who got the Nobel Peace Prize has been at constant war, and we have moved from one conflict to another, to another, to another, whether it was through the Arab Spring in Yemen and Libya and Iran and now North Korea. I mean, it's nonstop. It's just absolutely nonstop, because it's through chaos that they're going to bring this change. And when I tell you, no matter which one of these groups you belong to, that you're not going to get your way, that applies to everyone. This is a new agenda. A lot of people have said that they believe the Obama administration is trying to crash the economy. Well, again, go back to understanding Obama. I don't believe he's trying to crash the economy. I think that he will allow it to crash if it comes to that point. But until then, this is a push, and he's going to push and push and push, because he needs this radical crisis in order to bring about the change that they want. You know, Hillary Clinton, who did her college thesis on Saul Alinsky, her, John Kerry, everybody that is in the administration that has been put there by Obama all has the same agenda. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. If they didn't all think alike, they wouldn't all be there. So they're working on a multifaceted attack to make sure that all of these divisions. Well, here, let me give you a good example. We're talking about perpetual war. Perpetual war, we're in conflicts all over the world, all of the time. At the same time, he wants to cut the military. Does that make any sense? Well, on the surface, it doesn't make any sense at all. He's constantly at war. We're constantly in a conflict. We're constantly sticking our nose in where it doesn't belong. And at the same time, he wants to cut the military. Why? Because it makes perfect sense if you look at it from their point of view. Because this is going to cause a problem. And the more problems there are, one of these things are going to spur a disaster. One of these things are going to not only spur a disaster, but it's going to solidify each and every single group against each other. It's going to solidify their point. It's going to make them more determined than more determined than ever. This is the idea. They create the problem and then come in as the savior. Say, look, we'll fix this whole thing, just like with the economy. We'll fix this whole thing if we just have one currency with equal value everywhere. This is the one world agenda. A global government. I'll bet they would love to have one single leader. I'll bet that would just tickle them pink. So it makes you wonder. While they're doing this, Obama also signs the NDAA, which gives him unprecedented powers. Now, I know, I've heard this argument a million times. Presidents have had that power since Eisenhower. That they've had this power. They have, but Obama has expanded on it. And he's expanded on it in concordance with the times that we're in. And this is also multifaceted, as in the same time he does that, where he's allowed to, for instance, declare martial law in a time of peace. At the same time, they buy 2 billion rounds of ammo, and they literally swallow up the ammo market. And they're buying assault rifles, assault vehicles. Homeland Security has assault vehicles. They're doing military exercises in American cities. Now, is it hard? Is it hard to see how multifaceted this is? How this is just another intimidation factor. This is another wedge. You know, this terrorist attack at the marathon. I've already heard that it's a right-wing conspiracy. I've heard that it's a left-wing conspiracy. I've heard that it's a false flag. Some of you know what a false flag is. For those of you that don't know what a false flag is, let me go through this briefly. A false flag is when an entity, whether it's a government, a group, a special interest, whoever this group or special interest might be, will produce a false flag in order to bring about the results that they want. Now, a false flag was used by ever since the time of Christ. Nero used a false flag, where a false flag is where it's a facilitated attack that's blamed on somebody else. And they do this for the purpose that they want to achieve, whether they want to attack somebody or bring about some sort of change. They'll use this false flag. It's been used throughout history. It's been used by governments throughout history in order to achieve certain goals, to rally the people, to justify an action. They will use a false flag. Now, I'm not saying that this attack was a false flag. What I am saying is that false flags are not unusual to be used by governments, especially governments who really, really, really want to bring about some sort of change on their behalf. Let me give you some examples of these false flags. Not saying that this was one. I just want you to understand what a false flag was. The first one that I want to quote is the Great Fire in Rome. This was in 64 AD. And this was done by Nero. Now, what he did is he created a fire. He created a fire that really demolished not only Jerusalem, but a lot of surrounding areas. He did this to bring about the change, to blame somebody else. Spain did it. You know, the Spanish Empire was the first truly global empire. It reached its height in the late 1700s. By 1898, Spain was losing territories regularly. Cuba was to become increasingly hard to control, and a minor revolution had broken out. Well, that wasn't welcome news to the people of the United States, who owned Cuban sugar and tobacco and iron industry properties in over $50 million, which would be worth, what, over $1 million today. Well, here's the problem. Mainstream media, then dominated by newspapers, exaggerated and outright fabricated stories of horrible conditions under Spanish rule. This followed the old age maxim, if it bleeds, it leads. Well, the newspaper published stories about Spanish death camps, Spanish cannibalism, and inhumane torture. They sent reporters to Cuba. When they got there, they found a different story. Artists and correspondents like Frederick Remington, he wrote back to Hearst, who was in charge of a lot of major newspapers here in the U.S., said there is no war. He had the request to be recalled. Well, Hearst had a famous reply that said, "Please remain. You furnish the pictures, I'll furnish the war." And he did. His newspaper continually screaming how Spanish Cuba was going to hell in a handbasket. He convinced big business interests in the U.S. to put pressure on anti-war President McKinley to protect their Cuban interest. McKinley, in response, sent the USS Maine battleship to Havana Harbor as a calming show of force, because everybody bought into this false flag. 3 weeks after they got there, on the night of February 15th of 1898, the USS Maine exploded, killing 266 men. Now, there's two theories for this explosion. Some believe the explosion was caused by an external mine that detonated the ammunition magazines. Others say it was a spontaneous coal bunker fire that reached the magazines. And without waiting for an investigation, America's mainstream media blamed this tragedy on Spain, and it beat the drums of war. It started a war. To help pay for the Spanish-American War, Congress enacted a temporary quote unquote temporary tax of